Hello there, what's going on everyone? Today we're going to be talking about Clone Wars Armada. Oh my goodness. Alright, now, I did already video at Star Wars Celebration after this was announced, but it was real short and it was just a little interview. Some of you said you couldn't quite hear everything that was going on in there, and I gotta admit, I wasn't able to do a lot of editing on my videos, and a lot of things came out kind of crude. Plus, it was really noisy in the convention hall, so it made it difficult to try to get quality videos out there. So I figured now that I'm back home, back in Orlando, I'm still kind of recovering my voice. So if you hear my voice sounds a little scratchy, that's why. Talking for 5 days straight, teaching people games, takes a load. So we're back. Let's finally talk about the news that we've all been hoping for, expecting, waiting for, or I was honestly surprised to hear. Clone Wars is coming for Star Wars Armada. This is so big. This is so big. And also, I want to announce a new round of the giveaway is officially starting right now. If you are wanting to enter to win, you can win a $25 Amazon gift card for an expansion of your choice. All it takes is to be a subscriber and leave a comment. It's as simple as that. So, yeah, that's kicking off right now. Also, I have other giveaways going on Patreon as well, so definitely be sure and check that out. So, we're talking about Clone Wars Armada. They did announce it. They didn't really tell us much. So the first thing you're going to be probably wondering is, when is it coming? We're not expecting this to actually show up until 2020, so it's going to be a while. And that honestly makes sense. It's, they're just now beginning the development of this, so I don't think they, are going to be anywhere close to showing us products soon. I don't even think that by Gen Con we will actually have, a preview of Clone Wars Armada. Now that is a few months away. I think if anything, maybe they'll have some information like, is it going to have its own core set? Is it going to have an essentials kit where somebody can buy in just the core set and no ships and then choose a faction from there? Or are we going to see kind of like squadron packs, although squadron packs means something else in Armada, but the way X-Wing did it, where you got 3 ships in one, like a faction starter. A faction specific starter might be kind of cool also. But I'm still hoping that we get an essentials pack, if not as this, maybe to launch alongside this, so those people who this brings in, that are drawn to Armada can jump in for a little bit cheaper. Or maybe if it is a new core set, will it be a smaller core set? Will it be just one ship of each side, and maybe the price point will come down? That's something that I definitely hope for. Maybe 1 ship and 2 squadrons per side, maybe 4 for the Separatists, because the vulture droids should be cheap. In this way, there's more value placed upon the squadron packs that will give, because you won't, that's one thing with the Armada course, that you had 6 TIE fighter squadrons, so you didn't really need a squadron pack right off the bat. You had enough to work with. So, and if it's meant to be just that here's just how you learn to play the game, then 1 ship for the Republic, and then 2 ARC 170s or whatever they decide to launch with, and then 1 ship for the Separatists, and maybe 4 vulture droids would allow them to do a much cheaper core set. I would guess somewhere around a $60 core set or a $50 core set would be huge for Armada for getting people in to the game. Now let's talk more about factions. So what I want to talk about today is how this now being concrete news impacts a lot of things, because I'm going to talk about the existing factions first, how they may have a faction identity, because we've been hoping for a long time that we'd get more medium ships. I think a lot of people wanted that for a long time, and we know that they've said what's in development right now for Empire and Rebels are 2 sizable ships, so that has us thinking either large or huge, and if that's the case, that means we're probably not getting more medium ships. So Rebels may end up just being, the faction that doesn't really have much in the way of medium ships. As once we have, Republic and Separatists, and now we have 4 factions in the game. That may end up being the Rebels kind of calling card, is that they have, lots and lots of small ships and a couple of large ships. So that's their contrast. Large, like a big hamburger, like a Whopper with a side of fries. That's it, right? Maybe that will be how it goes. Conversely, the Empire is mostly Imperial Star Destroyers with lots of TIE fighters, and then of course the Super Star Destroyer. But generally, Imperials are usually seen as Imperial Star Destroyers. Granted, by now they do have a lot of other ships, so there is versatility to the Empire. I also think that the Empire will probably now get Venators as well, if they're going to be confirmed making a Venator. Right, well, they didn't say a Venator, but obviously they're going to make a Venator. That's like the mainstay of the Republic fleet. So if they're doing that, I think it stands to reason you can expect a Venator to show up for the Empire at some point. Granted, I would also expect them to be different, much like how the Y-Wing in X-Wing's Wave 5 for the Republic is different from the Rebels' older Y-Wing. I would expect a Y-Wing for the Empire to be cheaper than a Venator. For the the Venators for the Republic should be more expensive because they're brand new then, and they're thus a little bit better. But I could be wrong. They might be exactly the same, and maybe it's going to be the Republic Jedi on board the Venator that make it better. But anyway, the Imperial Venator should come at some point, I would imagine, because it's used so much in the books in the early days of the Empire. They didn't start out with Imperial Star Destroyers in mass quantity right away. They had a lot of Clone Wars era stuff for the first half of the Empire that still was in use quite a bit. Arquitens, Venators. I mean, we see Arquitens heavily in Star Wars Rebels, but we also do see a Venator behind Tarkin. So there's a lot of Venators that can make their way into the Empire. But primarily the Empire is known for the Imperial Star Destroyer, and the Empire is very, very strong with Imperial Star Destroyers right now. Maybe that will continue, and if the Empire is getting another large ship, I can't even fathom, is it going to be another Imperial Star Destroyer variant? Like, maybe that will continue to be the Empire's thing, another Imperial Star Destroyer. I really don't know what they're planning to do. It might also be that ship from Solo, a Star Wars story, but I think that the Arrestor Cruiser, but that didn't seem to be a very sizable ship. That seems like medium at best. So I really have no idea what could be coming for the Empire. I really thought if we got another Imperial ship, it was going to be something small, like either the support ship, the Dreadnought-looking ship from Rebels Finale, or the Carrion Spike, which are both significantly smaller than something that I would call a sizable ship. So, maybe we're just getting another Imperial Star Destroyer. So, now we're going to talk about the Clone Wars factions, because I think they're the ones that their identity is going to matter the most. So, Republic, obviously, the two ships that you expect to see the most are the Acclamator and the Venator. And I think both of those are going to fall into the category of medium ships. You could potentially make an argument for the Acclamator being large, because it's a little bit larger, but it's not really a firepower ship. But I have a feeling they'll both fall into the category of medium ships. And I think your Republic fleet will largely be medium ships and, some small ships. So that's going to, as far as size goes, I think that will be their theme. Lots of medium and a healthy dose of small, so a good amount of both. And like bratwursts and hot dogs, right? I'm equating everything to food here. Maybe it's because I'm hungry right now. So, I think that's going to definitely be a thing. I think you're also going to see mechanics here that are different than the other two. I think the Clone Wars will definitely bring about new mechanics, specifically through them being clones. I think the clones will probably factor more heavily into their squadron-based play. And I do think they will have fewer squadrons because they're clone pilots. So they were more expensive to produce. So I think they'll have fewer squadrons, but they'll be hard-hitting. If you compare them to the Empire and the Rebellion, you had TIE fighters that were cheap. You could swarm a lot, but not super effective. Whereas you have an X-Wing that's more expensive, more effective, but you can field less of them. Well, I would make the argument that maybe a clone pilot in an ARC 170 would probably be even more effective than a Rebel in an X-Wing because of their intense training and the fact that the ARC 170s are brand new at the time, whereas the X-Wings weren't necessarily in the best shape that the Rebels were using. They weren't old, but the Rebels were kind of a ragtag team, so a clone in an ARC 170 should be really, or at least moderately expensive if it was a generic clone. Now, if you do have named clones and elite squadrons and stuff like that, then that'll be different. But I think your typical clone in an ARC 170 or your typical clone squadron force will be a little bit more expensive than your typical X-Wings and maybe even B-Wings. That is one thing I expect. Now your Jedi Aces flying clones. Flying squadrons will definitely be more expensive, but that's going to be another aspect I think of the clones. I would guess that Your squadrons will be, heavily clone based, and I think your Jedi will take the place of multiple like officers on board your fleet that will be able to use the Force. I don't know if they will implement a Force mechanic in this game because there's not a whole lot of Force users in the game already, and it might say, well, should we consider, errataing, some of the other stuff that's out there? Like, look at Lando. Like, Lando almost feels like he's a Force user because of his effect on the game. So, like, are you going to have to do something all new with the Force? Or are you just going to give the Jedi individual cool abilities? So that's kind of how they use the Force. That seems to be the easiest way to do it. If you give, like, Jedi officers and Jedi commanders, like, commander is an easy way to have, like, I think of battlefield meditation, right? So if you wanted to be able to give your fleet a buff, well, commanders already do that in Armada. So having Yoda as a commander he's obviously going to be very powerful. He might even, you might even see more expensive commanders than we've seen before, depending on how well they work. I could see Yoda being a 40-point commander if his ability was strong enough. If he's, giving everybody like the ability to cancel one die when defending or something like that. Just throwing random things out there. I could see things like that being, pretty expensive. And that would be a great way to represent the Force. But what I'm worried about is that we might feel too similar to other commanders' control over the battlefield and other commanders' abilities. So I think you want to find a way to make that stand out. It might involve adding some new type of mechanic. It might involve a new type of die or a new type of token or something like that. And if so, I would hope that they can either errata some existing, like Darth Vader and Palpatine, or have new versions of them. So you can have Darth Vader strictly acting as commander, or you can have Darth Vader like using the Force, and same thing with Palpatine. I would be okay if they came up with different versions of them that used like whatever this new Force mechanic may be. So let me know in the description below how you would feel. Like, would you be okay with them trying to do something cool and clever with the Force in Armada? And if that meant coming up with new versions of Vader and Palpatine, and we really don't have like a Luke Skywalker officer or Obi-Wan Kenobi officer for like the Rebels. So there's very few Force users in the game right now. So if you had to make some kind of changes, that impact to the existing game now would be very minimal. And so I think it might be worth it. Now, moving on to the Separatists, I think the Separatist theme obviously will be some type of computing, similar to how it is in the other games. Like, we see AI for the droids. I think that might be like your squadrons may have to follow some type of AI function similar to how Legion has it written on those cards. But also we could see some type of networked calculation on the capital ships, similar to how the droids work in X-Wing. They may be able to, if they stay close enough to each other, they may be able to pass and share, defensive information. Maybe, let's look at the way, Jan Ors is a squadron that lets other squadrons use her brace token instead of their own. You might see something like that where, maybe there's a new defense token. Actually, a new defense token would be a great option, but maybe there's a new defense token that you can share. And then maybe the Jedi get a new defense token that's Force, and then that would be something easy that you could add to other ships if you decided to make a Luke and a Luke crew or a Luke commander that gave your whole fleet some kind of Force thing. So, but I think also as far as size goes, I think the Separatists are more likely to have the most amount of huge ships, and because they have said multiple times huge ships, S as in plural, and I think this is really the direction that they go with that. Between the Subjugator and also the Lucrehulk, which could very well be a huge ship. The Lucrehulk is really big, and I think not all huge ships have to be two bases, one in front of the other. I think a Lucrehulk would be two bases side by side, and I think that could totally work. It would still be a huge base ship, because it's just, I think the only clarifications is it has to have two bases, and something that round like a donut, it'd be hard to balance that on one base. So I think you do two bases side by side. So FFG, if you're watching, that's how you do it, and still make it huge, and give it a speed 1. Give the Lucrehulk maybe like a speed 1 with no yaw, right? So it has to do nav if it wants to move, but it's going to move real slow, real slow, and of course it shouldn't have to move very fast. It's the droid control ship. that would be really cool to have a huge ship that's just a dedicated carrier. It'd be awesome. And it might even do a little more than carrying, because if you do have this networked calculations type ability where you're letting other ships share your defense tokens or your other tokens, maybe command tokens and defense tokens, then that's a great thing. Another thing that I would like to see them do with the Clone Wars, in addition to maybe any 1.5 or like errata updates or rules updates, is to come up with some extra use for command tokens. So many of the commanders that are out there right now, and so many of the cards that are out there, put such an emphasis on command tokens, and I would like to see that be a new thing. Maybe that's a way you can spend the Force, by spending command tokens. Maybe that's something that you can do, or maybe that factors into it somehow. And if command tokens have much greater value after the Clone Wars come out, that might breathe new life into people like Garden Bell Iblis and Grand Moff Tarkin. So, I would like to see that. But I'm not to say that command tokens are worthless, but at least the price. Like, Tarkin is obscenely overpriced for the benefit that he gives. So, I would like to see, some new mechanics. And tokens is already something that's in the game that you wouldn't really have to change much if you wanted to give them some extra usability. But I do think for size, that the Separatists are going to have potentially 2 new huge ships, and that's exciting. Now, also, these huge ships are not going to be as big as the Super Star Destroyer. I am totally fine with the Super Star Destroyer being the biggest ship that Armada ever gets. The Subjugator is big, but it's not that big. So it might be easier to actually manufacture. Same thing goes with the Lucrehulk. That one's big too, but not as big as the Super Star Destroyer, so hopefully it won't be that hard to manufacture. And that's what I think. That's Clone Wars. So, very exciting time, folks. I can't say enough good things. I am absolutely blown away. I want to thank Fantasy Flight Games so much for making this announcement. And I'm really, really annoyed that I was working when this was going on and I could not attend the panel, because I don't know what I would have done. I might have fallen on the ground and had a seizure, and would not have been entertaining for everyone. So that's all I've got for you guys. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.